have James von Klemperer join us today. Jamie is president and design principal at Kohn, Pedersen, Fox, where he began as a young architect in 1983. As president of the firm, he is responsible for leading the staff of 600 people in 9 offices across the globe. In addition to focusing on his own projects, he leads the community of designers within the firm in exploring shared architectural agendas and goals. Jamie's designs have been recognized for the marriage of efficient program with adventurous form, with several having received AIA Design Awards, including my personal favorite in Washington, D.C., the Pedersen Institute of International Economics. It's a building everyone must see on Mass Ave. A few weeks ago, One Vanderbilt, designed by Jamie, won the 2024 AIA National Architecture Award. Envisioned as the first step in the revitalization of New York's East Midtown and Grand Central District, One Vanderbilt has transformed the area's civic experience and forged new accessible pathways to one of the busiest transit hubs on the East Coast. Manhattan's tallest tower, it joins the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building as landmarks that define the skyline of New York. Jamie's talk today, From Doom Loop to Boom Loop, Designing a Central Creative District, is particularly relevant as many of our cities are facing a downward spiral due to the decline of single-purpose districts and accompanying social pressures. Today, Jamie will explore how cities can drive innovation by using architectural principles to foster interdisciplinary collaboration and synergies. His talk will address how diverse and connected design solutions can rejuvenate urban areas and spur various forms of invention amidst the decline of single-purpose districts. Please welcome Jamie von Klemperer.
I guess I don't need this, right? Thank you, Denise. We actually worked together some decades ago when Denise was making real estate work around the country, and especially then in Washington, D.C., and Kairos has worked with many of us here on the other side of the table in his life, planning Boston. So sorry for the title. I was searching for something catchy at the time a few months ago, but I think it succeeded because a few of my friends and colleagues from other parts of the world wrote to me and said, "What are you thinking?" But I did want to expand the topic a little bit. Being asked to talk about innovation districts is a little bit of a daunting assignment. First of all, we don't really know if they exist. We don't know how to define them, partly because looking or causing innovation to happen is a little bit like trying to plant truffles. You don't actually know where they are, where the ideas are, but somehow, someone ferrets them out, and I'm not sure how we can cause that to happen. But in order to approach the subject, I want to enlarge a little bit the definition of this talk to be something broader than innovation, to think more about creative districts. And as Denise was saying, the subject of how our cities, some of which are in desperate need. Paul Marcus was talking about difficulty in the office market. We thought it might return in some form, but no, it's not. And so what happens to cities when the centers are really challenged? Some more than others, of course. So I want to begin actually by going back, way back. And I don't know if the lights are doing the right thing here. They probably are. You can see the screen. It's a little bit hard with all this light, but if you can, that's good. Okay. To go back to 14th century, to Mr. Lorenzetti, Fulvio Lorenzetti, whose painting of Siena has served as a kind of a model for us. And he framed the problem literally or the question of what is a city, to show the virtuous city and then the problem city. But the virtuous city has in the same tableau a place of commerce, a place of entertainment, of arts, of joy, and yes, a place of industry. Notably, there's a loom, there are glass blowers. In 14th century, that probably qualified as technology and manufacture. And these all coexisted in a place with lots of public space, and some of the discussions before talked about how it's the places where people come together outside of the silos that really matter in thinking about creativity in cities. And so Lorenzetti then also went to the other side of thinking about the dysfunctions of cities, the city of good government, the city of bad government. And so what happens when cities are not well managed or the circumstances of cities are really troubled. In fact, sadly, only about 8 years after this painting was done, half the population of Siena died in the Black Death. So that was truly doom, and hard to believe looking at this. But in our world, in our cities, we have some pretty stark contrast. St. Louis, a lot has been written about the death spiral of St. Louis. You know, people don't go downtown because nobody else is going downtown, and that makes things worse. It's a little bit like Yogi Berra, who said, that place is I don't go there anymore. There are too many people there. Well, he didn't quite get the logic right, but still, a place of very, very little activity on the street versus Austin, Texas, with its supply of great new young minds from University of Texas, California companies coming in, providing capital and employment, and indeed a part of the country where real estate is booming, certainly, and a lot of our work at KPF is found, most recent work. So if we think about the cities that we could say are doing well in some senses, these are vast generalizations, but where the downtowns are lively and there are, it's hard to get a seat at a restaurant or a seat at the theater. Tampa, Austin, Miami, Vancouver, Nashville, Midtown. Pick these as examples. So what is working in these cities and not in others? And then how can we relate that back to issues of science, technology, and innovation? So just to look at a cartoon of what you might say are the constituent requirements for a good creative center of a city, a good central creative district or innovative district. Well, access to capital, academic institutions such as the Institute here, affordable space, room for growth, housing, and then the less tangible aspects of life in a city, of a healthy environment, access to nature, industrial heritage, transport, efficiency, et cetera. So those cities we talk about have such gifts or such assets. And if we look at a chart here made by the University of Toronto sociologist, this is a little graph of how well various American cities have rebounded since the height of the pandemic, with the sort of central average of each city marked in black, with the workday hours. This is all measured by cell phone use on the left, so lagging behind, but in green, busting ahead, are the more, let's call them the amenity uses of entertainment and sports and leisure, et cetera. Well, that's what's leading these downtowns, of course, not the office space. And so if we make now look at a couple of spider graphs of cities that are challenged today. So these colors are that make up this pentagon: retail, dining, arts, entertainment, hotel, convenience and services. Those kind of extra quality of life functions. Not very abundant in San Francisco, Chicago, Houston, but in Vancouver, Midtown Manhattan, Austin, Nashville, et cetera, a much bigger proportion. This is measured in square feet per kilometer of GFA. So the ratio of the sort of the workaday stuff versus what is special in our lives. And clearly those cities that are embracing the greater variety of uses and have in their cultures doing better today. Or one last pseudo graph, this kind of blotch graph showing the density of amenities as described earlier in San Francisco, which we all know is a very serious case of the draining of the downtown, the lowering of rents, office buildings being given back to banks that won't even take them off the hands of owners. And then on the right-hand side, Vancouver, which is not a place anybody wants to develop a new residential tower today, and yet it's a healthier city in many ways, in other measures. So the question that now I want to get into, that's the heart of this 30-minute talk, is how can design play a role? After all, I'm an architect, I'm not a technologist or a real estate person, so most of what you might be thinking about it is not, I can't know enough to really comment on. But buildings, building form, and urban design, yes. And how can those issues factor into the fortunes of cities as we try to allow our American cities to recover, and in a way, by giving more liveliness to the sector of innovation, technology, et cetera. So two kind of older examples of places of innovation, two circles. We're all familiar with Cupertino of Lord Foster, and maybe some 50, 60 years before, 1957, Eero Saarinen's design for Bell Labs. So, but these are clearly ex-urban projects. So wonderful things have been discovered in these buildings and are happening, but the knock-on effect of enlivening other aspects of urban livelihood, not so much. So Bell Labs, for example, and there are only 5, all white men it appears, working in Bell Labs who got Nobel Prizes or had Nobel Prizes somewhere along the way. I think there were 10 in all. So a place of prodigious invention, and the transistor and many other inventions from 1957 until still today being created, but not the sort of physical environment today is going to attract graduates of this institute, and we need to look to different models than this kind of regimented bunker-like building, albeit Eero Saarinen carefully designed structure. So we might move in thinking about other models from a circle to a square. And in this case, the square at Trinity College, Cambridge, the largest enclosed square in Europe, and the place where Sir Isaac Newton was educated. And so how was his thought, how did it evolve? Probably many answers to that question, but one, of course, is the apple. And the apple might remind us of moments of disruption, of discomfort, bonk on the head, come up with an idea. Or Paul Marcos is talking about 2 people in a room and someone yells over to their spouse or partner, what about this? Or as a neuropsychologist, Anjan Chatterjee, who heads the Weissman School program in neuropsychology at Pennsylvania, talks about changes in mental states. Why is it that when you're in the shower sometimes you come up with an idea? Because your body is going through a transformation of state. And therefore, it's a good thing to be outdoors or to take a walk. Precisely what Paul was talking about. But so this little square is not just a square, it's part of a bigger, what we could call an academic ecosystem. In fact, it's really more of an urban design. Not just one square, but 2, 3, 4, 5, not just classroom, but residential at the Cam River on the left for exercise. Rival institutions next to St. John's. So Trinity, St. John's, Trinity Hall, King's College. That little college of Trinity has spawned 34 Nobel Prizes. Longer history, but still pretty impressive. So now we begin to think about what makes Trinity so effective. Down the road from Trinity, the famous Eagle Pub, where Watson and Crick got together, you see on the left-hand side, to talk about, posing for the camera, to talk about the genetic code. And but it took the place of a little noise, a little beer, a walk away from the monastic confines of the college, to encounter, challenge, and come up with new ideas. Or another place where today new construction is creating such a place of a zigzag pathway leading towards a park and a lake. This is Hangzhou in Zhejiang province in China, the place where Jack Ma comes from. In a way, China's technology city, Alibaba. And this project developed by Gerald Chan, Ronnie Chan, to the benefactors, the larger benefactors of this university. Involved with this program, I think. So I wanted to show that. So now I want to go through a few examples that come from our work, from my work at KPF, just because I know the circumstances of these projects, so I can talk about them meaningfully. And what I've done here is just to organize scales of intervention from the room to the building, to campus, to neighborhood district, and then a whole region, the Greater Bay Area, and see how in these different scales, on the top in yellow, different ways of innovating through collaboration, community, social connection, and then at the bottom of the page through different urban operations, such as insertion of a building, transforming of a building, extending of the city, as in Seaport, how efforts to try to spur innovation have taken place. So let's begin with a room, one cell in a larger project. The project is found in New York City next to Penn Station. This is, you might recognize, the Farley Post Office, transformed part of it by SOM into a new rail station, but the other part now taken over by Meta, and that's something that our firm has designed. So this is sort of a form of communication that is outmoded. The letter, it's gone. Instead, and that's what the hallway looked like. But today, replaced by another communication-minded firm, company, a social media company. And so the way in which the planning works is that collaborative areas outside, what had been the core of the building, the elevator shafts, are complemented by these little Zoom-like, library-like, solitary study rooms in the space of one elevator. And so my colleague Hannah Kassem, who designed, came up with a very interesting idea of how to, with one room, with one cell, redefine this building, its spirit. But that led to a much larger program within about a 700,000 square foot building of busting through slabs, opening up atria, and then planning not only spaces, but the pathways. Who would encounter who, when, for how long, what time of day. And this is a little bit of theory coming from the Meta facilities people, but transformed into planning, shapes, drywall, carpet, et cetera, by my colleagues. And then finished a couple of years ago. So we then move on to the scale of a building. Well, now in a building, how do we, instead of just that one room, how do we sponsor these chance encounters? This building, no, it's not yet built in the early photograph here, but we see a part of Shenzhen. Even though a new city, it has a sort of dreary zone that has been there quite a while of buildings of a kind of monoculture of just manufacture or just work. So inserted into that is a building here, which is the headquarters for TP-Link, one of the larger modem firms in the world, both research, development, and manufacture. And the whole thesis of this building is that the two lobes on either side for dense pack of workers are complemented by the swervy slabs in the middle. You can see in the perspective, or rather the photograph of the building just being finished now. So in this atrium, you have these kind of wiggle-like nesting of terraces where phone calls, conferences, meals, et cetera, that's the social encounter part of the firm. And Cliff, the CEO, is working with my colleague Marianne Kwok, really believes in this sort of duality of invention, thinking, and work. And so now during construction, we can look up at the slabs. We can see what the space will be like on the terrace, no furniture yet. And, but it's an interesting model for a kind of innovation machine. They have to keep coming up with, obviously, with technological advances for these communicating devices. Now to move on to the campus. And we're transforming a building, or have transformed a building, in Moscavide, which is a sort of technology zone of Lisbon in Portugal. And this is a picture of what was a failed shopping mall, was meant to have an office building above, never happened. But obviously this is a kind of blight in the neighborhood. It's a energy suck. It's also a carbon problem waiting to happen. I mean, all of this concrete to be gotten rid of, and what do you put up next? So instead, what we've done is to hollow out the building. So you could see, this is just a rendering, some built photographs in a moment, but you could see the kind of opening of terraces, of stairways, filling in voids that make this into a building of much greater, well, no longer a shopping mall. Now the more than 50% has been made into a university of technology, of invention. So this is the European University in Lisbon. And to go with that are some smaller areas for companies, for technology company administration. So we see one more rendering here of this kind of community made out of the big, dumb block of a shopping mall. But the outsides now, as they are emerging, even there on the perimeter of the building, there's a sense of communicating visually back and forth between those on balconies, those in the neighborhood beyond. And the plan shows you the location of these courtyards, the breaking down of the scale of a building into these lobes for teamwork, and now the construction photos that's taken by my colleagues 2 months ago. A little bit of a mess yet. Green hasn't quite grown in yet, but what a fantastic, I think, achievement for my London colleagues to have made this kind of place of interchange of thoughts and of education in what was due to be taken down by the wrecking ball, a big hulking concrete shopping mall. And this is the typology we know, which is due for change around much of the world we inhabit. So moving on now to a neighborhood, going up in scale. In Detroit, my colleague Hannah Kassem, again, is working on this zoned pre-project, pre-construction, which sits between Comerica Park, where the Tigers play, an arena up at the top, a little park at the south end. Over in the left is an innovation center, which is being built by the University of Michigan and financed in part privately with some private development next to it by Steve Ross, the leader of related companies. So interesting plan to kind of take that deadened heart of a city that is really, we know, has been ailing now and losing population for decades, and to propose what you see here, this rendering. Now, certain buildings, some of these are new, some are existing, but this was a kind of a dead core. Some very famous old theaters, Art Deco theaters that are being revived. The sports helps, but over on the left-hand side, we sort of look along a central axis of a new street, and this is more of the Steve Ross related part of the project. But then this also leads on the other side to the University of Michigan, along with Ross's philanthropy, building for an innovation center. So what's in this building? First of all, it's permeable. An architectural feature or character. It's very important to cities that live and breathe and invite people to move from A to B, the big opening. But then the ground floor, which you can see here, and the second floor devoted mostly to high school students. So this is about community enlivenment, community action, and community involvement. So the youth of Detroit can then come and move up the chain, so to speak. Upper floors have to do more with research by innovation-minded or innovation-oriented departments within the University of Michigan that then will find a home in this innovation building. It is, by the way, a mass timber building, so there's a little bit of put your money where your mouth is with the nature of construction as the building is specified, or inside spaces of connection between different floors, and as it were, then between generations, if there are different age groups that occupy at least the lower levels. And then a district. So that's a place that should be familiar to many of you, because it's here in Boston, and it's the seaport. Kairos had a lot to do with the process of this project while leading the BRA. So 23 acres of parking lot, clearly a part of the city that was not put to its best and highest use. How many chances does one have next to a CBD of a great American city to realize something of an alter ego, a different kind of downtown? And and this is the point around, I guess, 1984, when Frank McCourt sold the site to Morgan Stanley, bought the Dodgers, and so the question was, what would happen here? Well, this is the plan that emerged, and it looks kind of modest and quiet, but there was a lot of intelligence. I'll give the credit to the public regulators and the developers and our design team for thinking about scale of buildings, permeability, again, of walkways, passageways, but most important, really, mix of uses. That kind of monoculture, which we know, we were discussing earlier. What about Canary Wharf? What about La Défense? What about parts of the world where office development and culture was sustained for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and now what do we do? But this, and it's kind of way before any issues of the pandemic, kind of insulated itself from that kind of danger by mixing residential, retail, the whole ground floor of the entire thing, then taken up by WS as a kind of a retail play and strategy. But not only office, lab, and culture and education, which were envisioned that didn't quite happen yet. I hope someday they will. But also the green, the public space. So here we have basically a progress photograph, and we could see some of the green areas popping out. They don't have to be dominant, but enough to kind of give light and air and some sort of recreation and sense of relief from work. And even living to the place. And the story of whether this is a technology district today or not is a long story. I won't really venture to answer it. Others can do better. But my understanding is yes initially, but no eventually, because actually the smaller, and he's showing here lots of participants of small tenants, but at the same time, some very big companies, it's a good thing, Vertex, Amazon have made the district in a way was too successful. If you succeed to the point where the rents are too high, then are you an innovation district anymore? And that's a big issue for all of us. You can't, this is back to the truffle hunting. You can't predict exactly where the fortunes of a development or large scale design are going. And it will bring me to a point later on about the importance of longer term vision of the more permanent aspects of building. But the public space, which is very much in the long-term DNA of the site, that open space to closed building, solid void plan, allows for spaces to gather for exercise, and then a small building, the district hall, which was meant as the innovation building. And yes, there was a public involvement in this. This was Mitch Weiss, who was the chief innovation officer of Mayor Menino, who said to us on the phone, we almost dropped the phone when he said this, we're making a technology and innovation district, and this is the innovation building. And so I gather it's sort of lived out its time and maybe transformed into another function at some point, but nothing is forever. And think about the innovation itself, whose lifespan of any invention or bright idea, 10 years, 15 years? So this played its role as a kind of a nugget in the middle of the mix of the seaport, as a place where entrepreneurs, financiers, people with a good idea, or people just wanted to have a good time, could get together. So a very important little tiny piece. And then in the middle of this, what we designed, and my colleague Ellie Gamberg worked with me on this residential compound known as Echelon, where the center is a little courtyard. This is a rendering, but the built structure is very nice, where actually 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, it's public space. So that public-private kind of equation can be very important for this sort of district and for any sort of urban design. And here the courtyard, as one walks through these privately rented or owned residential buildings into this square. And just on the other side, to the north of this, more or less in the Seaport District, the Fort Point Channel, one little second half to this mention of the seaport is Channel Side. So this is a site which today, today it does actually look a little bit like the last image, but it has been now finally, after many years, let's say 4 years or so, entitled through the BPDA and BCDC, other public groups, to be built by Related as a combination of a laboratory, residential building on the right-hand side, and office building behind. But just as important is the public space down below. The architecture, that as I was talking about the quality or the character of architecture in such districts, drafting off of some of the post-industrial, post-warehouse structures like, I think, 245A, a building really for the artists' lofts that make up that community. And so we thought very much about the character of that brick and the proportion of openings and the feeling of the memory of industry that could inform these buildings in Channel Side. So that should be coming out of the ground soon. And the public space of the park, 2-acre park, with a huge amount of public involvement of any number of citizens groups, artist groups, resiliency advocates, et cetera, but a very important way in which Boston safeguards the public realm. And public realm, again, being hugely important in the making of any kind of innovation zone. And that I could say from our work for Google in San Jose, that's been one of their major foci. So lastly, now to come to a region, scale of a region. Greater Bay Area, you may know, is a portion of China and Hong Kong with a population of between 60 and 80 million people. So, about the size of Germany. And so what happens there in the way of technology? Well, we know this is the place in Dongguan where many electronic parts are made. Foxconn, you've heard of, has their headquarters somewhere in Shenzhen. But many other companies well known to the world. Alibaba has something there, even though they're Hangzhou based. But Tencent, I'll show you later on. But for our work, we took on, and my colleague Jill Lerner, my partner, worked with me on this project to take a kind of a waterlogged swamp with some, very not long for this world buildings that had to come down somehow. So this is partly the kind of carbon efficient and resilient effort that this structure now this has become a university with 60 buildings designed and built in the space of 3 years, starting from master plan to students moving in, which is astounding. But it is the leading institution of engineering technology in South China. Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, it's the name of the university which twins with its Hong Kong partner. And so the design for this is really all about, now you see that this campus plan, and in the middle we see these colored lines, 8 very large laboratories, but the lines of red which connect them are the pathways of not the laboratory work, but the connecting activities of dining, conference, makerspace, et cetera. The university president's whole goal here was to obviate the problem of having silos, de-siloize the university, bring people together for these chance encounters. And so you could see the lyrical architecture of the swerves and curves in the middle, kind of the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain being more in the laboratories, which are shown here. But even in the laboratories, the concourse that connects them features very intentionally open, transparent places of movement, the stairways, the glass conference rooms, et cetera. So that, or even these sort of green funnel atria to sort of humanize the lab space. So there, the overall plan of what could be 8 very separated silos, but brought together with this kind of energy of disruption, of surprise in the middle, and the waterway that connects. So we're just about done now. The last image I want to show, this is, oh, by the way, the High Street part of the university is not just teaching and learning, it's also living, dining, but places for incubator businesses at the base of this. This is a rendering, obviously, but now it's been built. And so I just want to end on one note here of the largest of all scales that I'll show you today, which is part of the Greater Bay Area. And this is a design for what was an industrial port and a landing strip in Shenzhen, in Qianhai area, far western, Shenzhen, and it is the headquarters for Tencent. That's the proposal that was made here. And Tencent, as I mentioned, Pony Ma's huge electronic communication and gaming and other company, one of China's larger companies. But the principle here is to make a city which not only serves science, it's really about science. There's something in the components that would be shown here in the way of an automatic mobility street with even palettes of landscape that move along tracks. So there are ideas that are meant to reach far forward, but the whole spirit of the place is one that looks forward. And the very last point I want to make is about permanence, about reusability, that is very much on our minds with the American city and with the fast-changing world of technology. And that's to say that the worst buildings that we can make for the future are the ones that have to be ripped down, are not well adaptable in their dimensions and their materials for the future. And so as we worked on this project, and the last image here shows you a kind of a pile of warehouse-like structures. These are residential areas above the workplace, above the trading and the communication. And in a way, they take us back to Lorenzetti and his Italian hill town, because there are certain universal principles of visibility, of topography, of light and air, of nature coming into buildings, which we espoused in this project, which we think have an applicability no matter what happens with Tencent in the future. No company lasts 100 years. Well, very few do. So anyway, that's a little show, and I hope that serves us well for the Q&A, or rather, the panel that's to follow. Thank you.
Why don't you, thank you.